Welcome back, everyone, to the Career Cafe, a place where teenagers ask experts. Today's episode is all about a field of information and opinions. You can guess it from the title. We will be discussing the insights and details of journalism over some apple pie. Specifically, we will be covering journalism's outlook in the future and the ways of social media journalism, the career opportunities in the field, and how students from different academic backgrounds can enter it will be discussed. We will also be talking about the scenarios of media bias, privacy breach, and dishonesty, alongside the role of personality and personal qualities played in this type of career. I am your host, Arushi Arney, for the journalism episode. And if these are some questions that you look forward to getting answers for, stick around with me till the end. Thank you for tuning back, listeners. As mentioned before, today's episode is going to be about journalism, and we have invited Aditya Narayan as our expert. Aditya sir has a BA in English. He was a former writer in the campus section of the Pune Mirror under the Times of India, and currently he works as a journalism and media studies teacher at workshops. I look forward to discussing your journalism questions with him. Thank you for joining us today, Aditya sir. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me, Arushi. I'm doing great. This is something that is really good to look forward to. It's quite an exciting thing for me to do. I have not participated in a lot of podcasts, so this is in that sense a novel experience for me as well. And seeing as I'm not even in the country right now, I'm pursuing my own education abroad. So it's a really great thing that I can continue to impart whatever my experience of journalism has been to all of you, even though I'm technically not academically involved in the field right now, even though I am involved as a teacher. So it feels great to be here.
It's great to hear that you're excited because I'm definitely excited about the interview as well. And as you know, we sent out a survey to our listeners in order for them to give us questions regarding journalism as a career. And we were pleasantly surprised that we collected some very comprehensive and diverse questions. They would sure be fun discussing about. So I think to start off, one of the most relevant ones that we got, and I think this is something that many aspiring journalists ask themselves is journalism a field with enough scope to build a stable career in the future? How does one decide if they should opt into journalism and mass communications?
Right. That's not an easy question to ask or to answer. I will try my best though. Is journalism a field that can inspire a stable career? I would say it is somewhere in the middle. It is not as stable as a lot of mainstream career options that Indian students especially dream about, like engineering. There's medicine. There's to an extent even law. These fields are safer in the sense that they can more directly lead to a job after you finish your education. That is not the case with journalism because, not always. Even though you have institutes that can teach you journalism and that can give you a journalism degree, these institutes do not necessarily guarantee you a position in a particular company if you have completed that degree. So,
Yeah.
in that sense, it is not as stable as some of the other common options that you might think about. At the same time, I would say that with the advent of social media and with the growing popularity of several alternative means of disseminating information, such as podcasts and YouTube videos and other OTT or over the top platforms, even, just media has shifted from this mainstream production of television and newspapers to these alternative independent sources. And that means that there is a rise, or at least there is going to be a rise in how journalism is practiced, and there is going to be a rise in the popularity of journalism. It's just that the journalism that we come to see in the future may not be, or probably will not be, the journalism of the past. It won't be a journalism that is defined by ground reporting. Like, we won't get on the ground maybe so much and physically follow people around. What we might instead do is tap into their social media accounts and see what their online presence and activity is. So I would say that it is a field that is, in a sense, dying because the old journalism is no longer going to be functional for the future, which is dominated by social media and the internet. At the same time, a new form of journalism, I think, is on its way to growing, and it is this new form dominated by digital media, dominated by social media, dominated by alternative means of giving out information that are not limited to the physical newspaper. It is this new kind of journalism that we are seeing a burgeoning in, and this new kind of journalism is on the rise, and this is here to stay. So if you're expecting the old form to survive, I don't think that's going to be possible. Although in India, newspapers will still live on for a while because the population is mostly rural even today, and there is a huge problem in the accessibility to internet services in the country in a lot of places. So the newspaper and other older forms of media and journalism will survive in India for a while, but ultimately we have to give over the reins or give over the control to a new kind of journalism, which will go on to become a stable and popular field to practice.
So in the future, the face of journalism is going to be different, but we still have opportunities in it.
Exactly. The field survives, but not in the same form.
That's promising to hear, because one of the most driving aspects for me as a journalist is basically the passion of talking about stuff, or like giving out my opinions on it. So I
Right.
don't think that the form as much as would impact it, as long as
Mhm.
you get to do what you wanted to do, what you're passionate about.
I mean, if you're passionate about giving out your opinions, if you're passionate about forming informed or nuanced opinions, then journalism will always be a place where you can find your home, so to speak. Even that has challenges. Journalism is not always unbiased. It is not always perfect. Definitely not the case in this country. Recent news reports will prove that there is a huge problem with how journalism is practiced here. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for collecting information and transforming it into an informed opinion, then you will always find a place within journalism in some way or the other, even though it might be a difficult journey for you. So yeah, I would tell you to keep the hope alive.
Of course. Therefore, I also think that it's important for like aspiring journalists or like media studies students to recognize what type of work they want to do in the field, right? And connected to the last question, I think it would be good that if you could spread some light on how broad the career opportunities in journalism are. We already touched
Mm.
upon this, but like, are there any jobs that are beyond writing for newspapers or reporting for news channels in the field?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I was talking to this. So I teach as a journalism and media studies mentor. So I was talking to a fellow mentor of mine yesterday itself, and one of the things that we just chatted about was the fact that it is so difficult for us to tell our students to follow reporters these days because ground reporting isn't really active right now. There are several reasons for this. One of them is, of course, the pandemic. You can't have people going on ground. But also, even if there wasn't a pandemic, there is this shift in the way journalism is practiced from traditional sources of media like newspapers, like magazines, like news channels, even to social media, digital channels, more people-based platforms. Let's put it that way. In the mid and the late 20th century, at least in this country, journalism was pretty much dominated by the newspaper. When the newspaper came about and when radio came about, there was this information revolution, so to speak, where one piece of information could be transmitted to theoretically, all the population of the country at once. The problem with this that we now begin to realize is that this one source of information is pretty much unquestionable. You can't really point a finger at it and say, what are you doing? Is this correct? You can't do that because there is no alternative source of information for the people to consume news from. And that is a huge problem. It's still a problem, but I would say it is rapidly being transformed by the emergence of alternative sources of information. That also means that there are burgeoning or there are emerging career opportunities for people in these alternative sources. To shortly answer, no, of course not. There's no obligation for an aspiring journalist to stick to the newspaper or to stick to a television news channel. Yes, these outlets are still valuable sources of experience if you are trying to just start out in the field. So if you don't know what it's like to work in a journalistic environment at all, then it's a good idea to start from working for a newspaper or interning at a news channel. These are good foot in the door techniques. These will help you sort of carve out an area for yourself in the industry. But beyond that, it is up to you to expand and go away from these traditional sources, move to podcasts, move to YouTube videos, move to writing a blog of your own, move to social media sites. I mean, Twitter is the obvious choice, but other sites that are predominantly creative, like something like Instagram or Your Quote, even these can be used to practice journalism as citizen journalism. Today, most of the journalists that I look up to and that I regularly consume are on YouTube. Most of them are on Instagram. And that is where I source my information more than television news, to be honest. So I would definitely say that if you have an interest in media, if you have an interest in exploring different mediums to sort of practice your journalism, then you'll have a good time in this field in the future, because newspapers and television channels they're old, they're traditional, they're here to stay for a while, but they're definitely not the only means for you to practice your journalism. So, and the connected advice that I would give to this is, how in our parents' times, they used to judge a newspaper based on the newspaper's name. Okay, Times of India is very popular, or I like Indian Express, or the Hindu is my kind of newspaper. So the judgment that consumers gave went to the newspaper, or to the television news channel. Now what is happening, and what I would recommend aspiring journalists to do, is to build a brand out of themselves, to not rely on a newspaper or a television news channel to build that brand for them. Now, the need of the hour for an aspiring journalist is to make sure, or to try to make sure, that his or their own name is what people look for when they read an article. So it shouldn't matter that I work for Times of India, for example. What should matter to my consumers is this article is written by Aditya, and that should carry a value of its own. Okay, Aditya is someone that I like because he's unbiased, hopefully, or Aditya is someone who conveys his point, and that's why I want to read him. Obviously, these are all positive judgments, because what do? You gotta hype yourself up. Yeah, but no, seriously, even if it's something critical, like, okay, I don't like how Aditya reports this particular thing, it's fine. As long as Aditya or my name is the brand and not the newspaper or the magazine or the radio channel that I'm working for, that is good. So there are two things that I would like to summarize this in. Number one, of course, newspapers and news channels are not the only source of career opportunities. You can have a career as a YouTube journalist. You can have a career as a podcast journalist. You can have a career as a blogger. You can have a career even on Instagram. These are uncharted territories, which means that they haven't been explored that well before. So there is that risk involved. There is that uncertainty. But that also means that it's a lot of excitement. You're doing something that hasn't been done before. And I do think that it is going to be rewarding in the future. That's my first response. My second response is, try to build a brand out of yourself and use these other platforms to make your own brand instead of relying on the brand name or the goodwill of the institution or the company that you're working for. That would be my response.
That's interesting to think about, because when we talk about platforms like YouTube, podcast, it's like even bigger journalistic countries in the West are trying to adopt to these platforms. So you'll see news channels who post their episodes on YouTube, or you'll see newspapers that have like adapted to e-formats where you can read news online. So you can definitely see a shift there. And also, I like the way you explained the importance of personal branding of a journalist per se in the future, because I feel like if as much as you create the job that you do about yourself, you feel a personal connection to it, and it's
Right.
amazing that you can build journalistic careers out of that.
Yes, it definitely is. Yeah.
Next question is kind of relating to that, and it talked about like how some people might study a different field. For example, they might study business, computer science, literature, or psychology, and then later want to enter the journalistic industry. So so how can students from varying academic backgrounds such as these enter the journalistic industry, and is there any way that their current knowledge in these particular fields can be beneficial to them further in their career?
Right. I actually have gotten this question quite a few times from the people I teach online, because I teach an online course. And the thing about online courses is that you can enter it and you can see if it works for you. And if it doesn't work for you, you can back out. But if it does work for you, you get to know something new. So, I mean, the way the education system works in this country, you really don't have enough spaces to grow yourself breadth-wise. You don't have enough room to expand into different fields that you would like to go into. Instead, you become more and more specific and you become more and more entrenched. Okay, engineering to engineering. First, I'll clear 10 standard, then I'll do medical. So this breadth-wise expansion or this breadth-wise growth is not really a thing in the education of this country as much as it should be. So what happens to a lot of people in India, I would say, is that they try to satisfy their curiosity about these different fields through things like online courses. And this has happened to me as well. I signed up for an online course where Biswa Kalyan was teaching comedy. I'm like, okay, I'll see what that's like, and I'll see if I can do it. I see if it works for me, because there is no outlet for stand-up comedy in the mainstream education system. So this condition is very common. You grow up and you study in one particular field, and then halfway through your degree or even after your degree is done, even when you are working, after 2 years of working in a particular corporate environment, you realize this is not really for me, and you want to explore. The thing is, if you realize that this is not for you, the expectation that is put on you is you need to know what you want to do, if not this. And even that people are not sure about. So that is where I think journalism stands as a solid place for people to go. It's definitely not the only place, but it's one of the places because it is so interdisciplinary and because it has so many branches that can be exploited or used to people's advantage. What is journalism about? It is about communicating well. It is about understanding people. It's about managing the dynamics of power and political authority between various bodies, either of a country or of other countries. It is also about using language to your advantage. It is also about, for example, capitalizing on or providing information on particular issues that are plaguing the country today, such as the coronavirus right now, or such as the state of the aviation or the airline industry. So all of these things that I mentioned are all fields of their own, and they're also part of journalism in some way or the other. Communicating well can come from an English degree, which is the case with me. Understanding people can come from psychology, which is the case with a lot of my students. A lot of them have been psychology students and have now gotten into journalism. And they go on to become solid journalists because they understand people. Managing the power relations between different countries, that is politics, or if it transcends national boundaries, it is international relations. Even that has a place in journalism, right? Using language effectively, again, that's if you have majored in English, Hindi, or any predominant Indian language, then that will again help you because manipulating language to get the right information across to your people is exactly your area of expertise. And if you are someone who has a degree in, say, engineering, I get a lot of engineers too. A lot of them are disgruntled by their profession. Like, I don't want to do engineering. I wanted to do journalism. My parents put me in engineering. What do I do? Here's the thing. You can either report on everything as a journalist or try to report on as many things as possible, or you can pick a particular area, a particular niche that you are confident in, and only report stories that pertain to that niche. For instance, if you have majored in economics, you needn't always bother with celebrity scandals when you are doing your reporting as a journalist. You can report on the state of the airline industry. You can report on the Indian economy. You can report on cryptocurrency. There are so many outlets for you to practice your journalism, not just generally, but in a specific way that helps you capitalize on your educational background, be it economics, be it English, be it psychology. So that's why I like journalism in the sense that it gives you a door to it gives you a door that leads to where you want to go, even if you come from a non-journalistic background. So even if you are from economics, from psychology, you can be a beat journalist. A beat journalist is basically a journalist who capitalizes on or reports on a particular beat. A beat in journalistic language is a kind of area of a field of reporting. For instance, you have crime beat journalists who report predominantly on crimes that happen in a particular area. You have journalists that report exclusively on economics. You have journalists that report exclusively on legal things, even on medical matters. Nowadays, journalists who have a medical background are the need of the hour because of how we are able to track the coronavirus and whether we can even survive. So the people, for example, who have studied medical and then gotten into journalism, this is their time. This is when their unique position as someone with experience in both medicine and journalism, is to the advantage, and it's even more advantageous than someone like me who has done a degree in English and is now in journalism. So what I'm trying to say is journalism mein apna time aayega. If you are if you are even if you're not from a journalistic background, there are niches for you to develop in, and the most advantageous thing here is that you needn't report on everything. You can pick an area that you are most confident in reporting in. You open the Economic Times. Does the Economic Times talk about celebrity scandals? Does it talk about Saif Ali Khan's son and their personal relationships? It doesn't, because it's a newspaper almost exclusively focused on economic matters. Similarly, if you open Bombay Times or the equivalent of that in any other part of the country, you won't find an analysis of stocks in Bombay Times, because it's a newspaper or a supplement exclusively directed to entertainment. So even when you consume news, you become aware of the fact that journalism isn't just reporting everything and throwing it in your face at the same time. It is reporting in categories. It is reporting in compartments, which means even if you come from a compartment that isn't very journalistic, you can still make use of your knowledge to report on incidents that pertain to the compartment that you are familiar and confident in. So if you come from a non-journalistic background, don't fret. I'm pretty sure if you are passionate about expressing yourself journalistically, you will find your place in journalism.
I think that's really reassuring, because I know that some of our listeners who sent in our questions had this
Mm-hmm.
really big fear of, if I stick to one career, can I not change it? So, like, getting an answer to that and seeing that there is hope in the future for changing your career, going into journalism. So, you also talked about like how if you have the personality for journalism, then that's definitely something you would thrive for. And
Mm-hmm.
we also got like this very particular question from one of the listeners who said, wanted to talk about personality traits of a journalist. And it
Mm-hmm.
said, to what extents are traits such as honesty, sincerity, and the skill to be unbiased important in a journalist? And for example, if someone has like a lack of truthfulness or transparency, will that affect their journalistic career in any way?
Yeah, that is a profound question. It is a question that personally affects me because journalism is a field that expects honesty and transparency from you in a very rigorous way. At least good journalism. And I try to be a good journalist. I know there are people who don't try to be a good journalist,
We
but
have
we'll leave it to
examples.
them. Yeah, exactly. So, well, if you are trying to be a good journalist, then you will very quickly realize that the field has very is a very demanding field in terms of the personality that it asks from you. It asks for honesty, it asks for sincerity, it asks for truthfulness, even at the cost of discomfort. If you look at the journalistic ethics that are followed by some of the leading journalistic organizations around the world, it's a very exhaustive list. And the first thing that comes to your mind when you read such a list is, how can I expect one person to embody all of these characteristics?
Yeah.
There's things like be honest, but don't hurt someone if you can refrain from hurting them, right? Be transparent, but don't disclose national secrets if they can compromise on national security, right? Report on as much information as you can get, but don't override someone's privacy. And there's a lot of moral dilemmas that come into the picture once you start practicing as a journalist with the aim of being ethical. You very often run into problems which challenge your own moral compass. And that's the scary and enlightening thing about journalism, in my opinion. It not only gives you a way to look at the world, it gives you a way to shine a light on yourself. Very often, you may have seen this happen in a lot of crime dramas that occur on Netflix or that appear on Prime. There's this recent series called Patal Lok, which has such a journalist at its forefront. Now, he's famous in the field. He is doing well in the field. Well, he's popular. That character has amassed a huge amount of wealth and fortune and credibility as a journalist. But the show also goes on to show us that he's not a perfect man in his personal life. And that is where the dilemma is. Journalism asks for you to be ethical in your journalism, but that doesn't mean that you are already ethical in your personal life. Whether this will affect your journalism depends on how you address this flaw when you look at it, right? When you realize when you are practicing journalism or just in your personal life. I am a firm believer in the fact that journalism is, over time, it becomes a way of life. It becomes a way of looking at the world and at yourself. It doesn't end even if you stop practicing journalism. So suppose I am a practicing journalist and I have inculcated this way of looking at the world, this perspective with which I see everything around me. Now, in that situation, and this has happened to me while I was a practicing journalist, I realized on the personal front, quite recently, in fact, that I have made a few mistakes in my personal life. I have compromised on my honesty and the transparency that I hold in my own life with the people that I'm close to for reasons of my own. But I have made a mistake, and it is up to me to see it as a mistake and to see what I can do in order to better it. So this realization is disturbing because it not only makes you doubt yourself as a good person, it makes you doubt yourself as a good journalist. If I can't always be honest in my life, if I can't always practice my life in an ethical way, how can I expect myself to be efficient to answer? And that is the challenge. That's one of the biggest challenges for me in journalism. I know that I am not perfect. I know that we have grown up knowing that we are not going to be perfect people and that we are going to make mistakes and we are going to make wrong judgments. But when you're also a journalist, there is so much more. Like every mistake that you make, even in your personal life, it it feels like a bigger thing because there's also this responsibility on you to be ethical as a journalist. I would say in some cases it will affect your journalism if your personal life is not ethical as much as it should be. But I will also say that you can address your mistakes, you can face your imperfections, and you can better your flaws in your personal life if you take them as an opportunity to grow instead of be defensive about them and not admit to yourself that you're flawed. This is going into a little bhashanwala territory, but it is one of the most important realizations of my life, to realize what kind of a person I am and to realize that the person I am is not always good. We're all deeply flawed people. I am a deeply flawed person. And it is supposed to be the case that when I practice journalism, just like any other field, I will not do it perfectly. And I will certainly not be a perfect person while I'm practicing journalism. Where I would say everyone is learning and growing at the same time in this field. But even if no one else is growing, I know I am. I know I am constantly looking at where I have gone wrong. I'm constantly realizing that I have made mistakes in my life. And hopefully, from my side at least, I'm trying to better them. So yes, it will affect you. It will not be a pleasant experience when you realize that you have been wronged, you have been ethical in your own life, you have been unethical in your own life, and you also expect yourself to be a good journalist. But there is a way to not let it negatively impact your practice. And as preachy as this sounds, it just involves looking at your flaws, seeing what went wrong, and taking the steps to be better in your personal life so that you can be better in your journalism.
I
I
think
hope you're not asleep by now.
no, no. I think it's actually really interesting and it's deep, and I view it in such a way that it makes journalism a even better field to go into because it promises you personal development. You'll have
Mm-hmm.
your personality developed. You'll have your own like beliefs, values, questions, and I'm a person who loves opinions. Like I love to listen to other opinions. So it's definitely something that if you are looking forward to and you want to grow as a person, it journalism makes you feel and think about it in that way.
Mm-hmm. Right, true. It helps you be a better human being just because it gives you so much accountability. Like here's so much power.
Yeah,
You are responsible for the opinion that goes out into this city-wide newspaper. So now you don't not only have to be a good journalist, you have to constantly realize when you are being a bad person and try to better yourself in your personal life, which is a really important thing for me to do.
the thing you said about power, it reminded me of a thing you said in our like workshop about
Mm-hmm.
like journalism being the fourth pillar of democracy, and now like it's
Right.
always in my mind whenever I think about it. So
Right. Yeah. It is
uh,
supposed to be the case. And let's hope that journalists like you and I, other people who are listening to this, will make it the fourth pillar again. Because right now it belongs to the market, not so much to democracy.
yeah, and I'm glad you could explain this particular question to us. We have one question left that I think like I purposely left out in the end for anticipation. It was one of the questions that was mostly asked because it's something that
Oh,
not only aspiring journalists think about, but I think that even the general public is like very curious about this, as bias
Mm,
is a topic that's it's being discussed nowadays. Social media journalism, as you said, and it raises a lot of questions. So,
mm.
as a journalist, while practicing journalism, what obstacles do you face while identifying, extracting, and ensuring that the information you give is factual and accurate?
Oh, so what challenges do I face when I read or when I consume a particular piece of information? Um, as far as I mean, to what extent is that accurate? That is again a very broad question, a very profound, a very deep question.
Yeah.
And I love how you put these two questions together. The previous question was very personal. It involved a lot of individual development to it. And this is a very social question. It involves the whole
The
world.
shift is good.
Uh, oh, yeah, 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 yeah. It is. And well, what challenges do I face? Where do I start? So, well, firstly, I said this before in this session that ground reporting is not really so popular nowadays. Usually now, especially with the pandemic and with the rise in social media, people take information from the internet, from online sources, and this includes journalists as well. Because journalists, a lot of them can't go out. They can't go out right now, especially with COVID. They can't go out and follow or physically go behind a particular individual, track their movements, and then put a mic in their face and ask them questions. They can't do that. So what they instead do is they follow their Twitter profile, or they follow their Instagram feed and see what information they can gather about that person from those sources, and then put that information up on their own Instagram feed and their own social media channel. So a lot of information is disseminated, is picked up, and is shown to the public through online sources. And herein lies the first major problem, or the first major challenge to authenticity and to factual accuracy. Because online social media platforms, no matter how authentic or how safe they are or claim to be, you know what I'm talking about with WhatsApp, how safe they claim to be, no matter that, there is always the fact that an online platform is a business. It is a market, and it is a market that thrives on the currency of, say, likes or shares or retweets, all of this stuff. It thrives on amplification. Amplification is the money of social media. If you amplify something, if you post it on your feed, if you repost it, if you retweet it, if you make a story out of it, if you give a shout out, if you tag that person, then you are essentially engaging in a transaction. What this means is that posts which are shared very widely become viral, and they become the most easy to access instead of posts that are factually accurate or factually sound. Instead of that, you have the posts that cater to what the people want the most. These are the posts that get viral. This is the content that goes out there and is consumed by most of the world, including me. So this is the first big challenge. How do you make sure that what gets viral is factually sound? And there are a few fail safes here. For instance, with something as widespread as COVID, giving out wrong facts about coronavirus will will eventually, after a few times, have action taken against you by a platform such as Instagram. But even that is not enough, because at the end of the day, an algorithm can't really track whether what you said is accurate in context or not. It's easy when there are numbers involved. If 1,000 people have died because of COVID, and if I put up a post saying 1 lakh people have died, then that is factually wrong, and it's easy to check that. But when it comes to words, now language, like verbal language, language that uses words, is very hard to evaluate, especially on its accuracy, because I mean, journalism itself is an evidence to this, sadly. You can twist things around and make them mean what you want them to mean in a very subtle, a very indistinguishable way, to the point where it sounds like the truth, it feels like the truth, it makes sense as the truth would, but it's not true. And it is only when a scandal like the recent one that we're all witnessing comes to light, that we realize that, oh, this thing that we thought was true was not true. So this is the first major challenge, and I'm not doing myself a lot of credit here, because the first challenge that I'm talking about is one that I don't have an answer to, which is how to monitor the factual accuracy of social media content. I don't think an algorithm is enough for it. If it is, then it has to be much more advanced than where it is now in order to see whether a post that is entirely made up of words and contextual meaning is factually accurate and is sound. Just to give you a small example, one of the major taglines or one of the major ambitions of the Indian right wing was Mandir Wahi Banega. Now, Mandir Wahi Banega is a very it's a statement that looks extremely simple at first glance, but it has so much contextual meaning behind it. What mandir is being talked about? Banega matlab kya? What is Vahi? Where are you talking about constructing this temple? That's the first thing. Okay, now you realize you're talking, a computer can probably figure out that you're talking about a Ram Mandir to be built in Ayodhya. Fine. But why? Why are people making this a viral hashtag? What is so special about this one particular structure in this one particular place? Why are people going to war online because of this one hashtag? All of that needs a history which even humans haven't properly figured out what exactly happened, let alone a computer. So these loopholes are major ones, and they are the ones that plague monitoring, or they are the ones that plague information transfer on social media. That would I would say is one of the biggest challenges in gauging the factual accuracy of something. The advent of social media has really made it difficult in order to see whether something is accurate. The other difficulty that social media poses is privacy, the privacy of an individual, and the line between probing someone to get to the truth and violating their privacy in an unethical way. It was not easy to begin with. Even in real life, it's not easy. For example, if you talk to someone and you make it a confidential interview and then they confess to a crime in that interview, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to respect that confidentiality and not disclose it? Or are you supposed to follow your responsibility to the public and disclose the crime to the people? What if they reveal that they are the victim of a heinous crime? Someone has done something horrible to them, but they don't want you to they don't want you to out that person. Maybe they're close to them. Maybe they still want to protect them. You find this tendency a lot of times in people who have been abused. This is a very common trait. They still want to protect their abuser, and they, even though they want an outlet for their emotions, which they often find in an interview, they don't want the interviewer or the journalist to take any action against the wrongdoer or the abuser. That is always a dicey thing to negotiate. And that has only become even more difficult with social media, because you now no longer have physical spaces as much as you have virtual spaces within the field of journalism. There is Twitter. Twitter is a huge place of its own, and it all exists virtually. Where are the lines? How do I know that if I retweet what someone has put up, I am not violating their privacy? What if my followers include people that they don't want to show their content to? What if one of my followers is, I don't know, an ex-boyfriend of that person whom they want to keep out of their life? And what if they regard just a simple retweet as a violation of their privacy? What am I supposed to do? What are they supposed to do? It is not clear. There are laws, but they are nowhere as specific and as, let's say, as apparent, as crystal clear as they should be. And I think this also ties into the inefficiency of the judicial network in this country. Courts are understaffed. They are dealing with so many more cases than they can handle. The quality of the judgment, well, it sometimes falls prey to these problems, and it's just not easy running a court or running a judicial system in this country with the way the society in this country functions. So what if such a privacy case comes to a court? Will the court, or even the constitution for that matter, have the necessary apparatus to figure out what to do in a case that is predominated by social media? I don't think so. I think we need to update the very fabric of this nation, which is the constitution, the document that decides how to live in this country. That itself needs to be brought up to date with this internet revolution that we are witnessing and that we are a part of. And we need to legitimize online spaces as real. No more of this bifurcation between real life and online life. The difference is blurring every single day. Just because this conversation is happening online, I'm not going to call this not real. it's not unreal. This actually happened. We are talking, your reactions are spontaneous, my responses are genuine, so it is a real conversation.
Yeah.
But it's happening online. So then we need to let go of this bias that anything that is virtual compromises on how real it is. It's time that we recognize that virtual things are here to stay, virtual spaces are here to stay, conversations, interactions, the administration of consent, and how people talk online, all of that is here to stay. And this also means that crimes that are committed on virtual spaces are also here to stay, and they're also real. So that stigma is not going to go away easily. But I think that is the first major sociological step in legitimizing virtual spaces, and legitimizing a guidebook or a rule book that tells you how to deal with privacy and other crimes, for that matter, on a virtual space. I think these two, the way social media has challenged factual inaccuracies and the way social media has challenged privacy, these two are interconnected, and these are two big two of the biggest problems when it comes to disseminating proper and correct information within the journalism of today. There are a lot of other problems, but these two are the ones that I primarily want to put forth.
I think that topic itself opens so many conversations about like the dilemmas that we
Yeah,
face, and it just shows us that we have a lot of more work to do forward, and like we have
true.
a lot of more discussions to have.
Mm-hmm.
As for this discussion now, we are coming to an end, and
Mm-hmm.
everything that you explained was definitely something that I found very useful, and I hope that many of our viewers and listeners find it helpful as well. It was great talking to you.
Thank you so much, Arushi. Thank you for calling me. It was great talking to you as well, and I hope this proves useful and entertaining for all the listeners of this podcast.
Okay. Once again, thank you so much for joining us in this episode. And that was it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that lovely conversation. As for the next episode, we will be inviting an astrophysics expert over for Sir Lemon Tart. If that is something that you are interested in, we hope to see you back at the Career Cafe. Until then, please do leave your reviews and share this podcast. And to learn more, please follow our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook pages. We would love to interact and learn more about our audience. For now, this was Arushi Arney signing off from the journalism episode.